Good morning. I'm Dave Apsley. I'm a forester and a natural resources specialist with Ohio State University Extension. Today we're going to talk a little bit about pacing and how to determine the distance on the ground without any measuring devices. In order to pace accurately, you really need to calibrate your pace and you need to spend a little time practicing. So what I've done here is stretch that tape out from the base of a tree to this point is 66 feet. You might ask, why 66 feet? Well, 66 feet is a chain. It's the old English measuring system. There's actually 80 chains in a mile and 10 square chains in an acre, so that math gets complicated when you get into that. But all you have to really remember is 66 feet. The reason we need to be 66 feet away from the tree is that the Merit hypsometer that we put on the tree measuring stick that we made is designed so that you're 66 feet away from the base of a tree to be able to get the height of that tree. So we need to practice and we need to determine how many paces it takes to cover that distance. But many of you may not be familiar with a pace. A lot of people think a pace is a step, so each time you take a step, that's not a pace. What we recommend is pacing is every other step. So if you start with your left foot and count every time your right foot hits the ground, that's a pace. So again, 1, 2. The reason we do that, if you're pacing long distances, it's just easier to be consistent. You want to find a stride that's comfortable for you. You don't want to try to be 3 feet every time. You just want to walk at your comfortable pace and you'll be more consistent. So again, when we pace, we count every other step. I usually like to start at the starting point, start with my left foot and count every time my right foot hits the ground. 1, 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to cover this 66-foot distance, see how many paces it takes to cover that distance. We're going to do that probably a couple, 3 times to get an average. And then we'll just keep in mind that number of paces that we have to be away from the tree to be able to measure the height. So we're here at the starting point. We actually go to the side of the tree and we're going to measure 66 feet away from the tree to determine that distance. Again, this is for practice purposes, and once you get your pace calibrated, you won't need to measure every time. We're going to start at this flag. We're going to see how many paces it takes to cover it. Again, start with your left foot and count every time your right foot hits the ground. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So for me, I'm right at 13 paces to cover 66 feet and have been for years. What I'd recommend is that you practice a little bit and record your pace to the nearest half of a pace. So if you end with your left foot again, then you would call it 13 and a half paces. So after practicing a few times, I ended up with 13 paces to cover 66 feet. You don't really have to know how many feet you've got in a pace to do this exercise with measuring a tree height, but I like to know this number because sometimes I'll pace other distances. And for me, knowing that I've got 13 paces in 66 feet or in a chain, it helps me to measure distances and acreages and stuff just by pacing. So the math is pretty simple. 66 feet is the distance we covered. It took 13 paces. So each pace equals 5.08 feet, or 5.1 feet is a pretty good number for me to use. So 5.1 feet per pace. If I don't need to be super precise, I can just count by fives every time I take a pace, and I'm pretty darn close.